What would it be like to get past this fear? What will my life be like if I push past this fear? You're listening to Raise the Anchor with your host, Melissa Burbridge, where we take you through life-changing decisions and dig deeper into those decisions to see how they affected the people that made them. Today on the show, we have the Profitability Coach, the host at Business Talk Library podcast, Mr. Terrell Turner. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. I'm really interested to learn more about your story, and there's a couple of programs that you run that I'm really interested in, and one of them we'll definitely get into later. But before we get into that, you had a big fear. What was it?
What's very funny is my big fear was about really putting myself out there. Like when I started my business, it's really putting myself out there. And I say it, thinking back on it's funny because it's like, if you're going to start a business, if people are going to buy from you, you got to put yourself out there. But for some reason, like that was my biggest fear. And it really paralyzed me from doing certain things that I know that I needed to do in my business.
And what is your business so our listeners know?
Yeah, so my business is providing accounting and finance services for small business owners. So helping them, kind of navigate, the financial decisions, like if they're looking to expand their business or they're looking to add more products, or helping them understand like what parts of your business are actually making you profitable and which ones may be hurting your business. So working with them to help them understand and navigate that. And I'm also a CPA, so I know how to have the conversation with their tax preparers to make sure they're not, putting themselves in a bad position when it comes down to taxes as well.
Yeah. So you do have to put yourself out there in what you do, but you also run a very good, successful podcast. How did that come about if you have a fear of reaching out to people?
That became part of my way of, just trying to start tackling the fear head on. Now, some people like when I tell people that, they say, well, how did you figure that out? I was like, well, first, a lot of the stuff that you do on a podcast, you're going to pre-record it. So at the time it was just me and the camera. And then it's like what people would see, they were like, oh man, you do so great. I'm like, that's because it's just me and the camera. And so, I would say the podcast really started me down that journey of, really getting more comfortable with what the message I had to share and the things that I had to say. And then I think we took it to a new level when it was no longer just me and the camera and I was interviewing other guests via Zoom. I think that's where kind of the fear started to break down some, because I started seeing the business owners, the founders, CEOs that I was having on the show. Some of them had the same concerns and issues that I had, to where I'm like, oh, this isn't just a me issue. Like other people have this too. And so I think that fear started to crumble a little bit more as I put myself out there more.
Yeah. So do you have any tips or tricks that you had to use to be able to start interviewing people?
Yeah, I would say, I definitely would tell people, again, like starting off with just creating videos and then, pre-recording them and then putting them out there. I think that helped out a lot because, it was just me and the camera. And then by the time people saw it, it was already done, and people would notice it and they were like, oh, that was really good. And then when I started doing interviews, I didn't do any interviews live. I still pre-recorded it. That way I could always start to edit that. And I think, like I said, it was more of kind of working from, I knew where my comfort zone was, and just to slowly, gradually stretch the comfort zone, because I knew, like earlier today, I did an interview live. I knew that, hey, 9 months ago, I was not going to do that. And just being okay that, hey, I knew I had to take baby steps.
So have you been live streaming some of your episodes or going on as a guest on live streams?
So I have been doing a couple more live streams, and what's funny is I was talking with local radio show, and they want me to come on like on live on air to answer questions about finance and accounting on like a regular program every 2 weeks. To where I think back, I'm like, man, 9 months ago I would have said absolutely no.
No, I hear you, but I have the opposite. I have no problem interviewing somebody else, but the second I want to do a podcast just by myself with me and the camera, I stutter. I think I have to do 7 or 8 tries, so I don't know how you found that that was easier. I guess I play off the other person, but when I'm doing it and telling my story, as much as I can stand up and tell my story, but the second I hit record, it's like, what was I supposed to say?
It's one of those funny things that I will say when I used to write a blog about for my business, and my wife was like, videos becoming a big thing, or podcasts becoming a big thing, like we should start doing video. And like for 2 weeks straight, I was like, no, I'm okay. I'll keep doing the blogs. Let's just keep with this. And she just kept pushing on it. So I'm just like, I finally broke down and said, all right, I'm going to go in the basement after work, and I'm going to practice in front of the camera. And since it was just me and the cell phone, and I was practicing, and then after I was done, I would delete it so nobody would see it. And I think that's why I probably was comfortable with just me and the camera, because, I had forced myself just to do just me and the camera. And so I had gotten comfortable with that. But like I said, doing anything live, it was just like, no, it has to be pre-recorded because we have to be able to edit.
Yeah, I know. Some of my audience is asking me to do more lives. And I used to do lives on Facebook, but I didn't do it as a profession. So it was just like whatever. But now that it's a profession, I'm a little scared. I'm like, I kind of like pre-recording and putting it out there. But I did live stream during a podcast conference, and I loved that.
Okay.
So it's a catch-22. I don't like doing videos live, but I like doing podcasts live.
Okay.
Weird. So what steps do you continuously do to make sure that that fear doesn't come back?
Yeah, one of the things that I told myself is that I need to continually, meet new people. And that sounds very easy, but I think when that was your fear, it's very easy to find yourself falling back into it. So I knew that, hey, you have to have a regular thing that you're meeting new people so you don't fall back into this. And so I tried to meet at least, two new people, whether that's, connecting with two complete strangers, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, or now sometimes I'll use Clubhouse, where someone that made a good comment there, or leading a good discussion, I'll send them a connection request on LinkedIn or Facebook, and just making sure that I'm constantly introducing myself to somebody, at least two new people every week.
No, that's a good goal. That's a good way to keep in front of that limiting belief coming back, or that fear coming back. So you run courses to help others with their taxes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I find is when it comes to accounting and finance, and I mean, and it's something that I think we've all kind of become we understand it to be that, money is emotional. I mean, especially when you get into business, because most people aren't trained in understanding taxes. They aren't trained in understanding accounting, finance. And I mean, you definitely don't want to mess up your taxes. And I think that a lot of it, what I find is it's not as complicated as it seems up front. And I think by starting to give people some simple frameworks around the subject matter, it starts to lower people's fear level about it. And people start to feel a little bit more confident that, okay, all right, I know how to make smart decisions concerning this this area. Now, yes, you may still need to work with, a professional when it gets a little bit more specific, but in general, when you start to understand a little bit more about it, it helps lower that fear level about the subject matter. And so in the courses, what I aim to do is really address some of the a general framework. Like there's one course that I have that a lot of people love is the stay out of jail plan. And with that one, it's really talking about, hey, here are some of the crazy things that people do that get them in trouble when it comes to taxes. And here are some of the things you want to keep in mind to make sure you stay out of jail when it comes down to taxes. And so I think by people having those simple frameworks in a language that they understand, it makes them feel a little bit more confident that, hey, that part of my business, I at least know how to think about it. And when I need additional specific help, I know what questions to ask.
Yeah, that's the program I was interested in. I just like the title because you never know. It's like, and I know the tax structure for businesses is a lot stricter in the US. So I'm in Canada. So it's not that Canadians are more lenient. They'll still come after us. They'll still do all of that. But I find from stories I'm hearing from my US friends, the business taxes are very serious and you better be filing them correctly.
They are. I mean, and it could be pretty aggressive because, I think probably the narrative that has come about, and I think even when you look deeper at the numbers, like a lot of the tax revenue that the government collects, it comes from businesses. And so from I guess you say the tax collector's perspective, businesses are like their biggest source of revenue. So they're making sure that they're watching the business. And then I think you've also had some people who have misused businesses and really kind of given businesses a bad reputation for illegal tax strategies and stuff like that. So I think business owners find themselves, they're the biggest contributors to taxes, and there have been some, ill-willed players that have given businesses a bad name. So it's very important as a business, you want to make sure you keep that right.
So what do you predict with this year being such a weird year? And you guys have had to close down and open and close down in different parts of the US. Do you predict it being a very weird tax year for most?
I absolutely do, because I think, in so many different ways, the government's trying to figure out ways to help businesses. And one of I mean, to be completely honest, taxes are probably one of the biggest expenses for most businesses. And so if the government's looking to help people, either that means extending like the tax deadlines, like right now we're in tax season and April 15th is the deadline, but that may get extended because people may need more time. That hasn't been announced yet, but I could foresee that changing. And if that changes, then like last year in 2020, that when the tax deadlines got moved, one of the crazy things that I had to educate people on is the deadline when you can file did get moved, but if you owe money and you don't pay it by the original date, they're going to charge you interest. So yes, they moved the deadline, but they're still going to charge you interest. So let's still make sure we do the right thing. So I do see that there are probably going to be a lot of changes that come that business owners really need to stay close to their accountant to understand.
Do you see a lot of tax breaks coming up this year because of the weird environment to kind of save them some money?
I that one is an interesting one because when I think about, when I think about some of the policy, even like when I think about just in the US, some of the debates, when the direct questions were asked to the now president, Biden about that, or even, Vice President Kamala Harris about, with the tax plans and stuff. And one of the things that always was interesting to me is when he talked about repealing, the Trump tax plans. When I was like, well, there's a lot of things in there that were specific to small businesses. And then later, in maybe a supplemental statement from his team, well, we only wanted to remove parts of it. So people need clarity on, okay, all right, well, what parts? Because some of these were very beneficial to small businesses that really need help. So I think because we haven't gotten a lot of clarity, I do feel like there are going to be some, some changes, and then they're going to realize like, oh man, that negatively affects small businesses. How do we get some new tax breaks back in specific to small businesses? Or how do we do, additional grant funding or some more low interest rate capital back in small businesses? So I do think there's going to be kind of this unfortunate yo-yo effect when it comes down to taxes and small businesses.
And I could probably see more work on your end if they don't get the clarity, because you'll file a bunch and then have to go back and amend them.
Yes, absolutely. Because, I'm one of those people that, when working with my clients, usually if your books are in order, you usually should be able to file kind of, February timeframe. I've kind of been waiting a little bit because I'm like, as the rules are changing, there's certain things like one of the big ones, like was with the PPP loan forgiveness. There was a debate about, okay, all right, typically if a loan is forgiven, that forgiveness is considered income. So the question is, well, you gave me the PPP funding to help me with my business, but if I have to consider it income, it's like I'm going to be in the same tax position. So the government was going back and forth about, well, should it be, should it not be? And so this year I've kind of been a little slower on getting the tax returns done, just in case there are some new rules that come out.
Yeah, and hopefully they come sooner rather than later, so you're not like working through the night just to get some taxes in time. Is it just you and your wife, or do you have a team now?
So directly in my firm, it's just my wife and I. We have a virtual assistant that works with our firm. But one of the things that we've done to kind of expand our capacity, because we also support clients from the bookkeeping side of it as well, is we've partnered with two bookkeeping partners where they handle the bookkeeping for our clients. So we come in and we layer the more strategic and the more analysis after the bookkeeping is done. So we've partnered to be able to scale our business more. So there are two bookkeeping firms, and between those firms, there's about 8 employees. So we have I guess you'd say, the access to the manpower of an additional 8 people.
Well, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I know most tax firms could just be satisfied doing people's taxes, but you guys go above and beyond to educate and to do the podcast to really reach more people. What made you want to empower more people than just the local and just do the everyday taxes?
Yeah, one of my earlier clients, they reached out to me for tax support, and I was like, okay, it was great. I could help them with that. And when I started working with them, one of the things that I noticed is there was a little bit of. I met with him and his wife, because his wife worked full time. He was running the business that they had, and there was a bit of tension there because there were questions and concerns that she had that he didn't know the answers to, and I don't think he felt completely comfortable of telling her he didn't know the answers to them. And as I started working with them, like after the first year that I worked with them, started explaining things to him more and he started grasping it, I started noticing like when she would ask questions, he felt more confident to be able to explain what he did know. And I started seeing between the two of them, the tension in their marriage started going down, which was better for them. It was better for their kids. And to where I started realizing like, oh man, like I do more than just provide tax support. It's like it's really providing that comfort and that understanding and really raising the confidence level of small business owners to where it's like, yeah, there's more to that we can do other than just doing people's taxes and filing it. Is really helping people become better business owners. So that's kind of how we started looking at how do we go above and beyond to really help with a full package of supporting business owners.
No, I find it very inspiring. Like I said, you're taking something that could be a very dry subject and easing the business owners' minds. I can tell you, my business partner does our taxes, and I'm so happy she does our taxes because I'm not a numbers person. And I find that if you were to explain my taxes to me, I'd probably fall asleep. But I have listened to a few of your podcast episodes because you were coming on, and you don't make it dry. I probably wouldn't fall asleep when I'm listening to your episode. So I think it's very inspiring that you can take a subject like that you're so passionate about. And I don't know if you just see like those speeches that the presidents give that everybody stands, that's what the level you explain the taxes in. And that's
Thank you.
very inspiring.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, that was one of those things that it was very tough for me, even earlier in the accounting field when I would have to go to trainings. It's just like I would rather do anything else other than just sit here and just suffer through. And as a CPA in the US, like I'm required to get 40 hours of continuing education. So I was like, I have to sit through 40 hours of this? Like, why?
Well, see, now you have to become that teacher so that those people aren't feeling like, oh, I have to listen to this all day. You got to get to that. So
I'm working on that.
Good. Are there any challenges you continue to have with your business?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that I think is interesting now is, I would say, we started I started full time in my firm like back in April of 2020, and the first probably 5 months were very hardcore in creating content to network, to getting the word out there about what we're doing, really overcoming my fear. Once I kind of got better at that, is really putting it out there. Now I think we're at a place where we have a lot of foundational things in place. Now we're scaling, and I'll be honest, like letting go of some things, like bringing on the virtual assistant, it was more emotional than I realized. Like to allow someone like Terrell, no, you need to go focus on other things. Like let them do that. Like, but no, it's mine. I don't want to let it go. And
well, it's your blood, sweat, and tears that you're letting go of.
Yes. And so that has been I would say a new interesting level of really allowing us to scale and to really, like say, even when I brought on the bookkeepers, like I knew it was the right decision, but there was a part of me, it's just like, well, it'll change the dynamic of things. And it's just like, Terrell, it's supposed to, because there are bigger and more strategic things that you need to spend your time on. So I would say I guess it's a personal challenge of being used to letting go and then really scaling.
Yeah. So are there any big goals and you'll have to let go of more things?
I would definitely say yes. There are some big goals. I think, and the way we've kind of set up our businesses. So the services is the TL Turner Group. That's the firm. And then we've also established the content creation and where we do the training and the courses as the Business Talk Library. That's a separate business. So with the Business Talk Library, I say we definitely want to do more trainings and create more courses. So we've actually partnered with a lot of entrepreneurial incubators. Because one of the things they've said is we've never heard anyone explain accounting in an interesting way. So they've been asking me to create training programs for them to teach finance and accounting. And so right now I'm working on 3 different ones right now for 3 different organizations. Plus, I really want to create a training program specific to different industries. So like, finance and accounting for restaurants, finance and accounting for marketers, finance and accounting for whatever industry it is. And that's going to be a big task of really making it more industry and business specific. So to me, that's a big goal on that side. And then I think on the firm side, I mean, right now we're about just shy of 10 recurring clients. And then we have a lot of project stuff that we do for different clients, but I really want to grow it to where we're about 20 plus clients on the recurring side. And I know that that's going to require me, again, to go back and face that fear of getting out there more. I would say that's a big goal for me.
Well, watching you here on this episode, I know nobody else can see you, but you definitely don't look shy of the camera. I can't tell that that's your fear.
I will say it's one of those things that it has been a lot of work because even I always laugh when and it's very humbling when people tell me that because they're like, oh, you're a natural. And I'm like, I remember the version of me that was in my basement. Like I would literally go in the basement and lock the door and wouldn't let my wife in to see me record and practice in front of a camera because I felt like I was that bad. So, and then afterwards, I would delete it. So she never saw the first 10 videos that I created because like I said, I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. And I think it's just that thing of making sure that I'm doing something every week to keep pushing that fear back.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you have any advice for anybody wanting to start a podcast or get over a fear of being out there?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I always tell people is, if you have a fear of doing it, just knowing that it's okay to have a fear. Because I think sometimes we try to wait until the fear is absolutely gone to start something. And I'm like, that will probably never be the case. Because I was telling someone, they were like, what advice do you have for someone who's afraid of starting a podcast? I'm like, well, I'm living proof you can do it and still be afraid. Because as you start to do it more, what you'll realize is that fear will get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I always tell people, start with where you are, because I started my shows with my cell phone and I think it was like a $15 or $20 lapel mic I bought on Amazon. And I just started there. It sounded rough. I mean, it wasn't polished, it wasn't edited, but that was what I needed to do to start. And then over time, as the fear started getting smaller, my brain was freed up to start thinking about, okay, how do we make this nicer? How do we make it a little bit more polished? How do we get into editing? But one of the things that I knew is like, you won't get to that kind of the polishing, making it pretty stage if you don't start shrinking the fear. And so I always tell people, start with your cell phone and just have a conversation. And to be honest with you, you don't have to share the first ones that you will record. You can always delete them, but the practice is what's going to help you get to that point where you can actually have a podcast that is going.
So do you edit your own podcasts?
Yes. So yes, I do. Well, not anymore. As of this weekend, I finally got to that point, and thankfully, with my wife's help, is we've hired a virtual assistant to where we've gotten kind of the editing process. We've gotten it down to a process to where we can hand it off to where it's like, hey, we know we're going to get consistent quality because we've kind of really worked on the process. So I don't edit it anymore. But we have, I would say, since the time we started, it was between my wife and I, we were editing everything in-house.
And how did you find that? Because I know I edit my own podcast too, although I've recently started handing it off as well. And it is something else because you're like, they're going to listen to me. Are they going to judge? I don't know. But editing my own podcast and hearing myself was scarier than actually projecting it. So did you have that fear? Were you okay hearing your voice?
To be honest with you, I'm still not okay hearing my voice because it's one of those, I don't know what it is. It's just like, I know it's my voice, but sometimes when I hear it, it's like, is that me? It's like, I know it's me. Like, why am I asking that question? But I will say one of the things that I started doing to get over that, like with my podcast, what made it and would help with the process is I started structuring my podcast because I would want to go back and then create highlight clips that I can share on LinkedIn. So what I started doing was I kind of let the guests know in general, these are the questions I'm going to ask. And I knew that, hey, I want to create a 2-minute highlight for every interview. So I would the question that I ask at the very end is, what's 2 pieces of advice you would share with other business owners? I would always put that at the end. So whenever I would go in to edit, I would edit the introduction where I only have to hear my voice for like 10 seconds. And then I would immediately go to the end where they're sharing their 2 points. I knew that was the highlight. And it's like, I know everything. I did the interview, so I know everything in the middle. There were no issues. So I just had to listen to 10 seconds of myself talk and then them talk for the last 2 minutes. And then I can edit and be done to where I'm like, I don't have to listen to myself the whole time.
I wish I had that self-control. I don't know. I'm like hearing the whole thing. I have gotten to the point that I'm like, oh, that was a very good question. I should do
It's always funny when you have that, like said, it's like, it was you were there when you asked the question, but it's just like when you hear it, it's just like, oh, that was very good.
I know. It's a little confidence boost. So what motivates you to get up and do all of this inspiring work every day?
Yeah, I think when I started working with the small business owners, it really changed my perspective because, my career started with working with, the big companies like General Electric and other Fortune, 100 companies, multi-billion dollar companies. And, no offense against those huge companies. It's just, I just wasn't as inspired because it just really seemed like, you're working with these big numbers. But when I started working with smaller businesses and I started actually seeing the people who own the business and seeing how, hey, this business actually puts food on their table. And when I started making that connection, I would say it started really motivating me to say, okay, all right, I'm doing more than just accounting. I'm actually helping these people in their livelihood, and they're creating legacies for their family and their children. And even when I started working with clients that were hiring employees and really talking to them, where some of my clients that are restaurants, like they were really concerned about, are we going to be able to make payroll based on what's going on, and start realizing like, man, this is more than just numbers on a page. These are people's lives involved. And so that really motivated me to say, hey, you know what? I have a skill set that can help them do what they need to do in their business more effectively. So that kind of keeps me going and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to use my skill set to help make a bigger impact than just, dollars and cents and numbers on a page.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, you definitely do make a bigger impact on those smaller businesses. Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
working with small businesses because you can actually see the change. Whereas with the big, I guess, Fortune 100, so you don't necessarily see any change. They just see, okay, am I getting money or do I owe money? Like, just let me know.
Absolutely. I mean, and like I said, I mean, it's not as, there's not as big of an emotional attachment, especially like I said, when you get to the really big companies, a lot of the executives and leaders that you work with, I mean, they have a contract with the company to where it's where you hear about all these golden parachutes and stuff. So it's like they don't have as much of a vested interest in what happens with the company as opposed to like a small business, because a small business, like, I don't have another option. Like, this is my option. Like, if this doesn't work, then it not only impacts me, but it impacts the employees, it impacts the community as well. So I think I found it very, very rewarding to work with smaller and medium-sized businesses.
Awesome. Before I ask the last question, how can our audience learn more about you or follow your journey?
Absolutely. I will say that I am very open about, what's going on in our business. Like I said, with the different shows that we're doing. So I always tell people, the businesstalklibrary.com is where we post all of like the free shows, the you'll see the videos, you'll see my wife and I, my wife does a show in Spanish as well. So you'll see that. And you'll see the different things we have going on. And I would say the Business Talk Library is a great place to go. And then I would say second is probably LinkedIn, Terrell A. Turner, CPA. And on LinkedIn, you'll find me where I post regularly on LinkedIn. And probably on LinkedIn is where I'll start to post a little bit more of kind of, hey, here's the challenges. And one of like the things I posted earlier today was about my challenge of that whole concept of me time. Like I made a post about that and how I was horrible at that, but I'm getting better. And I talk about stuff like that on like LinkedIn because I know that's not only an issue I have, but it's something that can help other people.
No, it definitely is. And there's always been that guilt that when you take that me time, you're being selfish. It's not, it's a good thing. It's taken me years to figure that out. Actually, it took me 2 kids to figure out it's not a selfish thing for you to want to have a small break from everybody.
And I struggle with that so much because it I don't know, and to be honest with you, I still don't know why I struggle with it. I just, when I started to understand it, and I think once I started to really put myself out there and really face the fear of putting myself out there in my business, I didn't realize how exhausting it can be to face your fears. It can be very exhausting, and I started realizing like my wife would be like, "Are you okay?" Or, "Hey, you want to go do this?" I'm like, right now I just want to like sit and do nothing. And I started realizing like, oh, this is that me time thing people talk about. Like
Yeah.
maybe I need more of this.
Well, building an empire takes a lot of energy. So it's not a bad thing to take some me time. I know often I hear a lot of entrepreneurs say, but if I take that me time, what's going to happen to my business? What's going to happen to this? Like just take it. You'll actually appreciate what you have more when you come back to it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's one of those things that as I start to talk to people who are further down the road, that's one of the things that they tell me. It's like, you taking that time to step back is just as important as the work that you need to get done, because actually it's going to make you more effective when it's time to do the work. Because if the exhausted version of you is doing the work, you're probably going to do a half speed effort. And that's not right for your clients. That's not right for your business. And you're gonna hate it afterwards because it wasn't your best. So it's taken me some time to really force myself, like, hey, you know what? This is valuable time. Like me taking a break, this is valuable time.
And then you also got to fit your wife in there somewhere.
Yes, and what it has done is, and she's complimented. She's like, you know what, you're much more pleasant when you start taking. Just like, I'm just like, oh, and she's like, because there was like 2 weeks ago, I was very, very tired from helping clients, and I mean, of course, with everything going on with COVID, it just seemed like tax season and just accounting, like it just seemed like that was just ongoing. Like when the deadlines got extended, it was great, but it was tiring because what it just meant is now what used to be, from January to April, now is January to October, to where it was exhausting. And my wife was just like, yeah, you look tired and I want you to take a break. And one of my friends, actually is one of my clients as well, that, his business, he was like, based on the advice and the things you've been helping me, like his restaurant actually grew during COVID to where he was like, hey, we need to take a break. We're going to go somewhere for the weekend. And my wife was like, yeah, you should go. And she was like, and even when I got back, I hear her talking to her friends like, yeah, Terrell went on a trip and, he's much better to deal with when he's getting a break.
No, that's awesome. And that's awesome that your friend grew with a restaurant during COVID. That's impressive.
Yes, absolutely. I think, yeah, a lot of hard work for him. And I think it's just for him, it was one of those things of just as he started to understand the things that I was explaining to him about the financial implications of his decisions, he started being able to think about, hey, well, I should probably make this decision instead. And as he started doing that, he started seeing the benefits of it. And, again, that's one of those things that motivates me is helping business owners, feel confident that they're making the right financial decisions in their business.
Awesome. So lastly, who inspires you either personally or professionally?
Inspiration, I would definitely have to say, I think my dad will always be like my greatest inspiration and still is. I mean, my father was a veteran in the U.S. Army. He was a medic And so, I mean, and I remember when I was a kid when he had to, my family, we moved to Germany because his job was to train soldiers on how to do emergency medical attention to other soldiers in the middle of a war zone or in the middle of a battle. And so we moved to Germany and he had to train. And I remember looking at the paperwork, I guess his commendation paperwork when he retired, he had to train over 10,000 soldiers. And then he also had to go into Desert Storm, and just the stories I heard from other soldiers that talked about like when they were in the middle of a gunfight where there were bombs falling around, where his job was to go in, to pull people out, apply medical attention. And so, I mean, just seeing, knowing my dad and, over the years, as I've gotten older, we become, much closer as I've learned what it means to be an adult. And I think just seeing him, knowing that, hey, he was willing to put himself at risk to help and, serve others, that has always and will always be an inspiration to me.
No, that's truly inspiring. I'm trying not to tear up because that, like, just going to war, let alone having to do all of those medical things. I used to be a nurse, so I know from that perspective that can be very stressful. So yeah, kudos to him. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely inspiring. And he's raised a very good son, so that's awesome as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. It's been awesome having you. I could keep you here all day. You're making numbers interesting, which is the last thing I would expect.
Well, I'm glad that that is I guess you could say that's my big goal is, to make numbers less intimidating and make them a little bit more interesting. So I feel like I'm making progress.
Yeah, you're doing an awesome job.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Raise the Anchor, brought to you by Alizé Creative Solutions. We hope you found that story very inspiring. We look forward to bringing you more week. Subscribe to the podcast to stay in the loop. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review to spread the love even further. We hope you have smooth sailing.